I find it interesting you use the word ritual because I do think that comes into play with the topic of smoking big time. And I say in my, experience as a vascular person, the group of people that I've seen that have smoked the most were the long haul truckers. And I think for them and talking to them over the years, some people smoke up to 4, even 5 packs of cigarettes per day. And
wild.
I'm convinced either consciously or subconsciously, they don't even realize they're smoking almost. It's so that ritual is so much connected into that key in the ignition and the window down and the driving. And it's just almost like an automatic response for them. It's like breathing. You don't tell your heart to beat or to take a deep breath. You just do it. And I think for some of these folks that are smoking a lot and they've got these rituals, it's really hard to break that.
They said that we'd grow out of it. Well, the joke's on them, that's just our brains. We're eccentric, loud, and stubborn. And most of our clothing is covered in stains. It's not a deficit of attention. There's just too much to think about. So if executive dysfunction becomes a little too much, if you forgot why you came in this room, or you're hypersensitive to touch, then put on your seamless socks and come join our little flock. Bitches stimming together, we're weirds of a feather. Weirds of a feather.
Welcome to Weirds of Feather, an ADHD-Adjacent and AuDHD-Adjacent podcast. I'm your host, Kristin.
I'm your host, Grace Beret.
And today we have a very special guest here to talk to us about smoking. He's a vascular surgeon. He's currently practicing in Maine. He's a Yale graduate, correct?
Yes,
you did your
trained
residency.
at Yale.
You trained at
Trained
Yale.
at Yale. Yes,
Yale
I did.
trained our first ever expert in their field and my former boss. And weren't you the winner of some sort of like resident of the year?
I was. I won the resident of the year, and I got to go to the medical school graduation with this big fancy outfit on and a big fancy like hat.
That sounds
all
very
that
Yale.
academic regalia.
There you
which
go.
was cool. But I was proud of that, and it was a very nice day to be able to participate in that.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Well, we're joined by Dr. McGillicuddy. Do you want to be Dr. McGillicuddy or you want to be Ted?
I think Ted. Ted, I'm a little bit more comfortable.
Do you want to be Dr.
When
Ted?
When people
Dr. Ted's
when
fun.
people call me Dr. McGillicuddy, I often think that I'm in trouble. Like someone say, "Hey, Doctor," So I think Ted is kind of a more.
Ted.
Or Dr. Ted is
We
fine,
could do
but
Dr. Ted?
Dr. Ted or Ted, whatever you guys are comfortable
Okay.
with, I'm game.
All right. We'll call you whatever you want to be called. But welcome to our
Thank you very
podcast.
much.
Thanks for joining us here in the basement in the cold.
Yeah, glad you could make it.
Glad you can make it down all the way from the north.
I'm glad to be here. You described it to me as very cold. I was thinking like Krypton or Antarctica, but it's not as cold as you told me.
Well, it's
so
warmed
yeah,
up a
yeah.
little bit. It's not like this winter was pretty cold.
Yeah,
There were,
because
like,
we have to shut the heat pumps off in order to record down here.
so the furnace
everything's-
doesn't run.
Yeah.
So it will get colder as the day goes on.
So in the future, spring, summer, better time to come down for
it's nice
for
in the
Good
summer.
time to be a
'cause-
guest.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
We should plan that.
Yeah, have our guests in the
probably,
warmer months.
Yeah, we should
Yeah,
probably
good
plan that.
thinking.
Yeah. Ted and listeners, a few weeks ago, we covered ADHD and smoking, how and why smoking is more prevalent among the ADHD population. And we also, I haven't done this yet, but we will do an ADHD journal club on Patreon covering a systematic reviewing causal factors of smoking and ADHD. If you're listening in the future, that should already be done, but I haven't done it yet.
You will.
I
One
will.
day.
It's written. I just have to record it.
That's the hardest part.
And then just to like hit this point home of like smoking is bad and also extremely prevalent in the ADHD community, I thought we could do an interview with an expert on the consequences of long-term smoking. Hence, here we are with Dr. Ted. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And once again, this isn't like, as we discussed with smoking, we want to do like more of a harm reduction rather than
A dare type.
this isn't dare.
Approach.
This is we're harm reduction first. We all know that smoking is incredibly addictive, but we're just raising awareness of one of the lesser known and publicized effects of smoking, which is vascular disease.
I feel like you don't think about the vascular
No one thinks
consequences of
about your
smoking.
toes when you're smoking.
No one's thinking about the toes.
I agree with
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, imagine if you went to a local grocery store, supermarket, hardware store, and asked 100 people walking by you, what happens if you smoke for a while? And they'd probably tell you lung stuff, because
Yeah.
I think that's out in the collective consciousness a lot.
Lung cancer has good PR.
Yeah, lung cancer does have good
Great
PR.
PR.
And you imagine maybe someone with lung cancer, or maybe someone dragging around that bottle of oxygen, maybe someone elderly at the store riding the cart with the oxygen. But I think, as you pointed out, not a lot of attention, or not as much attention, gets focused on the cardiovascular effects of smoking in the long term.
Which are in the medical community very well known, but in the public, in the general public, not as well known.
I agree. And I think if you look way back to the 1960s, when that Surgeon General's warning went on that pack of cigarettes, after about 6,000 or 7,000 scientific journals made the association between lung disease and smoking, it was really focused on a couple of things. One, it was focused on men primarily, because men were often more in the research community as research subjects. Often studies that were done at the VA that population was a lot of male veterans. Even if you look in vascular surgery at aneurysms, when the blood vessel gets too big, a lot of the recommendations still don't talk much about women. But certainly in the 1960s, they finally made that association, that leap between smoking and lung cancer, and also throat cancer. And it said mostly in men, maybe in women. And I think that led to a few major changes, which were you had to decrease your advertising for smoking, and you had to put that on the package of cigarettes that this could be harmful. But again, didn't really focus much on blood vessels, which are what we deal with in the vascular realm that I'm in, the heart, the carotid arteries that go to the brain, the arteries that go to the legs, which can be really, really impacted by long-term smoking.
Why do you think that is? Do you think the research just was kind of focusing on the lung aspect, or I wonder why?
I think so. I think intuitively you could imagine that you're smoking. So you're doing an action that involves repetition over and over, or something that involves your lungs. And so that intuitive connection, I think, between I'm introducing something into my lungs, and over the course of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of cigarettes, you could kind of imagine that this critical mass of data builds up and you cannot ignore it. There is an indelible link between smoking and cancer.
Yeah.
But the cardiovascular ones were a little bit harder to pin down.
That makes sense.
Maybe you were going to have a heart attack anyway because of your genetics, or you have high cholesterol, you got high blood pressure. And really, a lot of the links we see in modern medicine have really happened in the last 30, 40, or 50 years. And it just took a while for us to see, yes, it's not just smoking and lung cancer and emphysema or COPD, which are both diseases that impact the ability to exchange air in the lungs, but also that you have blood vessels that are getting either way too big because the wall is breaking down of the blood vessel, or they're getting blocked up with plaque.
That makes sense.
That does make sense. Geez, I was going to ask a warm-up question, but might already be warmed up. But
I got right into it.
I do have a gift, though, before.
Ooh.
Pass that bag over there.
Of course I
forgot. It's for all of us.
Oh.
I found these at Big Lots.
It's a carton of cigarettes?
Yeah, we're all going to have a good smoke, a chat and a smoke.
Similar.
Oh,
it
yeah,
is candy cigarettes. I'm
Great.
pretty sure you want one. You need a
See,
cig?
I'm old enough. I'm 46, and I still remember candy cigarettes. And I still remember from vending machine cigarettes, like back in the 80s when I grew up.
They still have those in Spain.
Yeah, you could get cigarettes at a vending machine, and you could go down and pick up a pack of smokes for your grandmother, your grandfather, your aunt.
Crazy.
I'm pretty sure those are probably from like 30 years ago.
Yeah.
They,
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
It's good to get the youths hooked early, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Do you
Really
like
reel them
candy?
in on the
You
candy
get
cigarettes.
a lifelong spender, you know, if you get them in early.
Are these bubble gum?
I
think they're bubble gum. I don't want to be chomping
Where
on
did you
bubble gum.
get these?
Big Lots.
These are probably,
These are
30 years
probably,
old.
yeah. They're, I tried
quite
one.
hard.
Was
it gum or did it chew up
it's
like
the
regular
type of
food?
gum that like completely dissolves into like this inedible goo.
Yeah.
Which I guess that's gum in general, but it's just like it's not a good gum. But I
think
thought
I'm
it'd be funny.
I think I'm going to tuck it behind my ear because I feel like that looks cool.
That does look cool,
right?
See,
smoking looks really cool. And I think that's the lesson to take away from this episode is that smoking is cool.
Yeah, Big Lots and Auburn's going out of business. There you go.
Wow.
There you go.
There you go.
Boy, it is
Looks
quite
cool.
It's like
old.
the worst. Yeah.
Very hard.
It's
Yeah.
probably
You can
from
taste that it almost wanted to be gum at some point.
Yeah.
Santa Claus put
It like
Puffs.
cool.
it puffs and then it will.
Whoa.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They
That's
do
pretty
like
neat.
puff out smoke.
There you go.
I think I got a defective one. Or I'm defective.
I
Either
think
one
you
of those.
took the wrapper
Oh,
off.
you're not
That's
supposed to take the
why.
wrapper
well,
off?
because that's where all the powder
Powder
is,
is?
where you blow.
I've never been a good smoker.
Well, you can have. Good thing we have more if you want another
Yeah,
one.
something to work at.
Yeah.
What do you think is more detrimental, the candy cigarettes or the big league chew that was like getting kids to practice packing a lip?
I would say
Oh,
the
yeah.
candy cigarettes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I guess maybe I was just a dumb kid, but I never made the connection between Big League Chew and
I guess I didn't either until I was older.
had to be told, I think by my mom. She's like, we don't like it because, chewing tobacco. And I was like, I didn't even know you could chew tobacco. That's gross. And it still is gross.
It's foul.
I was a
hate it.
baseball player and I wasn't a very good baseball
Did you pack a
player.
lip?
But Big League Chew was the precursor
Yep.
to packing your lip.
Yeah.
I think there was you like kind of graduated. That was kind of like how it worked in the dugout. So
Yeah.
I do think these things have
I don't like that.
maybe a behind the scenes marketing plan for how you get people hooked.
They definitely do. It's a gateway candy.
Well, I also think the flavored vapes are a gateway
Oh, yeah.
to the.
Those are terrible.
Those should be illegal.
I agree.
I agree 100%.
Gross.
Yep.
Gross. 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 Well,
You can still do your warm-up question
I
if
still
you
have
want.
a warm-up question. We got time. So this one, Christopher brought this up. He wanted to know, when you brush your teeth, do you wet the toothbrush first, then toothpaste? Or toothpaste, then wet the brush? Or both? Like, what's your process?
So I typically brush my teeth in the morning in the shower.
Mm.
And my toothbrush and
What?
my toothpaste
I am
are
also
already
in the
there.
shower
Yeah.
brusher.
You guys
Yeah.
are heathens,
Yeah.
first
And
of all.
so-
Who does
It's
that? You're
efficient.
like spitting
It's
on
efficient.
yourself.
You got the
So
shampoo
what?
going.
Yeah.
You got the soap going. You're brushing your
No.
teeth. You can really knock out a lot of stuff.
Absolutely
real
not.
I
quick.
agree. You let the conditioner set in, and you're already
It's a good
wet, and so
opportunity.
you can drool
Get a
all
lot of
over
stuff done at
yourself.
once.
Yeah,
Ugh.
you can make as much of a mess as you want,
I
Yeah.
and you're in the shower already. So
hated that
boom.
answer.
Do you?
Yeah,
Why are you?
I feel like you're like a toothbrush should be clean, and you're like
It is clean.
you're.
What do you think is happening
Clean.
to it?
Yeah, it's clean-ish on mine.
clean?
And then at night when I'm not in the shower brushing my teeth, to answer your original question, I will wet the toothbrush before I put the
First,
toothpaste
before-
on.
Do you?
Correct.
Do you wet it after as well, or just
No,
pre?
Well, one pre-wet,
All right.
and then I get down to business.
I
If I'm not in the shower.
I'm a big pre-wet person.
I'm pre and post wet.
Pre and post.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll try that.
Double
I do
wet,
like
yeah.
the double wet.
So I hate
That
when a
would be
toothbrush
like-
is too dry.
Yeah.
Oh,
It'd make it like a nice lather.
You cannot do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to
impossible.
make sure that.
And
it's
then
wet
are you
enough.
paste or you gel? Tooth gel?
Well, I have 3 kids, and so the real question is which one is less messy? Because there's like a toothpaste volcano in their bathroom, and the paste comes off quicker, becomes like a stalactite, but you can like knock it off, and whereas the
Yeah.
gel just coats
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
So I think for that necessary reason, we're more of a paste family.
Paste family.
I like the paste.
I'm also a paste family. Yeah.
Christopher's a big gel person, and
Like
so
a
we just.
baby.
What
we
kind of
just-
deodorant does he use? Is it like a colored gelish deodorant,
No.
or is it more like a chalky?
It's a chalk. It's
yeah, I
the
gotta talk to
degree.
him about that.
Yeah.
we gotta talk.
Yeah,
yeah.
he needs.
I know what I'm getting him
maybe
for Christmas.
he should go to your men's classes
Yeah.
with your sons.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Men's hygiene class
Yeah.
every Sunday.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I want to
Is
go.
that a real thing? Yeah.
Well, at my house, we do it like a couple times a month. Like my kid, I have 3. They're 10, 12, and 15. They tell me, when do you wear deodorant?
Yeah.
Brushing teeth, shaving,
We should
shaving
have-
That's
cream.
so wonderful.
We
Yeah.
should have that.
So many parents should do
hate
that.
It. They hate it.
I bet they do, but you know what? It's better than being the
appreciate it
stinky
later.
kid.
But yeah,
and
that's
it's
right, exactly
better
what
than
I said.
having your teacher have to be the one to tell you.
Everybody remembers the smelly kid. I said, you don't want to be the smelly kid. You want to
Yes.
be the next smelliest.
Yes.
And I said,
Right.
here's some deodorant, and let's talk about how to put it on. Don't forget, blah, blah, blah. They find it awkward. They don't really want to do it, but I think there may be some benefit there.
For
Maybe.
sure.
Maybe.
I think every parent should do that because I worked in elementary schools for a few years And it's just, if there's no parent teaching you, it's one of those things where you assume, well, it's just intuitive. But no, we all had to be taught. You need to wear deodorant.
I remember my father
Here's
teaching
how to
me.
do it.
Your face.
Yeah. And so the kids that don't have parents who teach them are the smelly kids. And then it's like, okay, if your dad isn't the one telling you, it'll be your classmates or it'll be your teacher. And they have to have this really uncomfortable talk with your kid about not stinking, So I feel like that should be a parent's
It's hard
duty.
to unbecome the smelly kid.
Yeah.
You'll
that
always
one
be known
sticks.
as
Once
that.
a smelly kid,
that
always a
one
smelly
sticks.
kid.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's probably some 39-year-old guy at some desk right now regretting not wearing deodorant when he was 11 years old or something.
Exactly. He's like, that was 1 year. And then I
year.
started wearing deodorant.
One bad month and I'm labeled for the rest of my life.
Exactly. It's a stigma you'll never grow out of. So I think that's wonderful that you do that with your boys.
I want to go.
Yeah,
I feel like I need education.
Yeah,
I wish someone told me
I could use that.
not only when I was a kid, I'd wash my face with remember the Noxzema pads, but a little moisturizer.
I would do
after.
those too. Yeah.
Because then you
Like
have the
acid.
driest acid face, but then by the afternoon you're grease cake. I just wish someone would be like, what about some moisturizer? What about some CeraVe? Anyway, all right. I'm warm.
Cool. I am also warm.
You're warm?
Yeah.
You want to get in? You want to talk about our accomplishments?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
You have accomplishments. So, Dr. Ted, every week we talk about little things that we've accomplished during the week to celebrate the little things. Because sometimes with ADHD, it's really hard to do little things like folding the laundry. So we celebrate them, and we have a little segment called Little Accomplishments, and we have a song to go with it.
Yeah.
So
we can just sing it, and you can watch us, I guess.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. But I got to look over because
Okay.
I need to be counted down.
All right.
Little accomplishments, but big in our hearts.
hearts.
That's our song.
Yep.
I love it.
All right,
I love it.
Grace.
Yes.
What have you accomplished?
I'm getting back into rock climbing.
I love
And
that.
I've gone back to
That's
the
a
rock
big
gym.
accomplishment.
That is-
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, my husband and I got really into it right before COVID. Well, he's always kind of been into it, but I finally got really into it right before COVID. We were doing it for 6 months. We were so good about it. And then COVID hit and we just stopped going because it's kind of the worst thing you can do when it comes to COVID is touch these holds that everyone else is touching.
I'm sneezing on.
Yeah, and we just haven't gotten back into it for, what has that been, 5 years now? Oh my God.
I know.
But we finally started going again and I've gone 2 times and wow, am I out of shape, but it's been really nice to get back into it.
Were you able to climb the really high one or the one that juts out?
No, I've always been really bad at the overhang ones.
That looks tough.
It's very
Yeah.
hard. It takes a lot of strength, which I do not have. So I'm sticking to the
Well,
easier ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like ones that I've discovered that I'm ultimately just a kid who loves to climb on rocks as opposed to wanting to do all this technical, my husband loves to do the technical balance and tiny little
He would.
holds and pinching and how to hold I just want to have solid holds that I can kind of scramble up and come down. So
Cool.
I've just been kind of taking it easy, getting back into it, and it feels really good.
Is that called bouldering?
Bouldering is when you don't have a harness on and the walls are shorter.
Okay.
So
I don't know. I've never been.
Will
Did
you
I'll have to
shoes?
take you.
take it
Yeah.
outdoors?
We have talked about it, yeah, because he's done it outdoors a few times. I've never done it, but I'd like to try
That
it.
seems awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe this summer we'll try it outdoors.
Wear a helmet, please.
Yes,
Don't
of
get a
course.
head injury.
I wear my helmet when I'm roller skating inside my own home. I'm so paranoid about
You're wearing
getting
one
a
right now
TBI.
for this podcast.
I always wear a helmet. I'm never not in a
Just in
helmet.
case.
Yeah. All right, Kristin, what have you accomplished?
I ordered a cake on time because I
Oh,
thought,
that's big.
yeah,
That is
I had
big.
to order a cake for this my aunt's 70th birthday party. Happy
my
birthday,
gosh.
Joanne.
Happy birthday, Joanne.
I thought I ordered it late, and I was like, oh no, this is the one thing I was supposed to do was to order the cake,
Mhm.
and pick up the cake and bring the cake, and then I thought I had to order it a week in advance. Turns out for Grant's Bakery, 24 hours. That's all they need to make a whole
Whoa.
big cake. So I thought I was late, and then turns out I'm on time.
Oh,
I'm
that's
all
the
right.
best.
It's the best feeling.
What
Yeah.
type of, what would you go with for
Well,
choices?
so that instigated a fight because I didn't know, and
Should
I was
not have brought
really
this up.
struggling with the decision of what to do because
Mm.
it's not just what do you want? Flowers? Do you want it to say happy birthday? What type of frosting do you want? What type of cake do you want? And then they have that middle layer in between, which can be different.
Ooh, like a jam.
That's what I did. I just went with white frosting, white cake, and a raspberry jam in between.
Yeah,
I
that
thought
is
something
nice. It's got
everybody
a
would
nice
enjoy.
flair to it.
Neutral
Yeah.
with some nice flowers, and it says "Happy Birthday, Joanne." So
she'll be thrilled.
Yeah, that's a good
I think
choice.
she'll be. I've spent way too long, and then I got Christopher involved, which was a mistake.
I bet.
Yeah,
Has he made it way more complicated than it needed
yep,
to be? Yep. He's got like charts and graphs and spreadsheets and taking polls. And...
He's like, what if we did a Harry Potter theme?
No.
She loves Harry Potter. I go, the birthday party isn't Harry Potter themed. We don't need Harry Potter on the cake. It'd be really weird to show up with a regular birthday party and then just a random Harry Potter cake.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Do you know what house she is? Is she?
She would be a Ravenclaw
Yeah.
for sure. She would be a Ravenclaw.
My family just went to Universal Studios in Florida. I don't know if I can name places.
Yeah, you can.
But they had a wonderful time because they're really hooked on Harry Potter, and they brought me back a Slytherin tie. I should have worn it today.
Are you a Slytherin?
I tested as a Slytherin.
Wow.
Which is a source of a lot of like
How do your
topics
sons
around.
feel about
They
that?
don't feel very good, but they also point out this guy that I think his name was Snape. And I don't know. I it's funny because I'm kind of a like Hobbit, Chronicles of Narnia kind of nerdy guy. And I never, for some reason, I missed Harry Potter. But I tested as a Slytherin. They told me that was a disaster. But then there's
See.
one guy who's, I guess, looks bad throughout. It turns out to be an okay guy.
Yeah.
They said
Yeah.
maybe I'm like him,
Yeah.
but probably not.
It's all about what you choose to do.
Yeah,
with
yeah.
it, you
Like
know?
I can be in that house, but the humans have the capacity to change.
See,
Exactly. I
Christopher
agree.
really wanted to be a Slytherin because he thought it was cool. It'd be cool to live in the dungeons.
Yeah.
I think he was a Hufflepuff.
I could see that.
He's a
Based
big
on-
Hufflepuff. I think I tested as a Gryffindor. Have you tested?
I think I've done it before, and it says Gryffindor. I'm like, you probably say that to everyone.
I know.
you
They're like undecided.
Everyone wants
They're
to
like,
be
we don't
Gryffindor.
know.
I could see myself being a bit of a Slytherin as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
love
It has
feel
its
like-
advantages.
I
Yeah.
feel
You
like I don't think
Cunning.
Slytherin is
Yeah.
a bad thing. They just have bad PR.
Yeah.
You
And
know?
in the end, like, when it's all said and done, I agree with you. Like they have some positive attributes.
Yeah.
All right, Ted, what did you accomplish?
I don't know if either of you know, but I have been slowly subsidizing Dunkin' Donuts for the last several years. And what I mean by that, I was drinking 2 very ginormous Dunkin' Donuts iced coffee.
It was impressive.
It was impressive. And so I was able to wean not off completely, but about 2/3 off.
Wow.
And so I used to get 1 giant coffee in the morning and then 1 giant coffee in the afternoon where we worked at the old job.
You had
And
a
I think
system.
part of it
because you had a
was-
mental health walk
Yes.
in between.
Part of it was by the end of the workday, I'm like, I need to walk out of this building, kind of collect myself, take a little time to kind of gather myself. And I would go, and that would equal a Dunkin' Donuts trip. And I was just like, I was just hardwired for that almost.
Because that time was, can we edit out a name?
Sure.
Can we edit out a name, Christopher?
Yeah.
Always look for you. And she's like, maybe I'll just call him. I'm like, don't call him. He's on his mental health walk.
right.
Just leave him alone. He's going to come back in like 15 minutes and he's going to be a better person for it.
And it's true. And it was a therapeutic thing for me. But I realized it wasn't really about the coffee, but about the time, just kind of half hour taking your
With that
taking your
job,
brain.
you just need to leave the building.
Yeah.
That was I got to get out of here before I go insane kind of job.
So if you hear about the Dunkin' Donuts in Lisbon going out of business in the next 3 months, it's
your
because
fault.
my $9,000 a month has been cut down to $2,000.
Shoot. Yeah, but they probably became reliant on that
Yeah.
money.
And
Yeah.
I'm not nearly as jittery, which is good. And I've
That's
switched
great.
over to
Good.
a little bit of tea. Like I'd never had a cup of tea until the last 3 months. And I've got all these nice
there you
teas. I
go.
go shopping for tea. I have tea in my house. I have tea. And it's not caffeinated.
Yeah.
So I'm liking the tea vibe.
Yeah, what kind of tea are you doing?
Because like a lot of herbal teas. I have
Good
this
chamomile or
nice chamomile teas. Even in the hospital, they have nice tea thing. You get the hot water. I like to pour the hot water in the cup.
in
You
the
put
doctor's
yeah,
lounge.
Yeah, even in the cafeteria, they've got all this assortment. I like fruity teas, like
Yeah.
raspberry,
Oh.
blueberry. Those
my
are my
mom's
go-to.
big on raspberry
Yeah,
zinger.
I
Moms
find it
love
very
raspberry
soothing.
zinger.
I have to say.
You know what I've been doing recently too, which I discovered, which is silly to say, but I discovered you can just drink hot water and put lemon in it if you want and just kind of sip on it. And that kind of takes the place of a hot little
I
beverage.
think it's more the act of just drinking
Yes.
something.
Yes.
You
Especially
need
when it's
like
hot.
a ritual, whether it's
Mm.
tea or coffee. It just kind of sucks because I do love like the flavor of coffee. So I'd like to drink more coffee, but I'm probably like a 1 cup limit before I start like losing my mind.
And I think that's the strategy for replacing these habits that we want to change, is instead of being like, I'm just not going to do this at all, is recognizing that you enjoy the action of having like a hot little bevy and replacing it with something like tea instead of trying to say, I'm not going to do this thing. I think it's nice to replace it.
I find it interesting you use the word ritual, because I do think that comes into play with the topic of smoking big time. And I say in my, experience as a vascular person, the group of people that I've seen that have smoked the most were the long haul truckers. And I think for them, and talking to them over the years, some people smoke up to 4, even 5 packs of cigarettes per day.
Which is
And
wild.
I'm convinced, either consciously or subconsciously, they don't even realize they're smoking almost. It's so that ritual is so much connected into that key in the ignition and the window down and the driving. And it's just almost like an automatic response for them. It's like breathing. You don't tell your heart to beat or to take a deep breath. You just do it. And I think for some of these folks that are smoking a lot and they've got these rituals, it's really hard to break that. And that's what I've noticed over the years, especially in certain occupations or certain exposures.
Yeah, I feel like it's just something to do, especially a job like that where you're bored, you're kind of just staring straight ahead. I feel like it just, you enjoy the process of like having something, literally anything to do.
Right.
Yeah.
It's going to be a boring job. Well, I think that would kind of transition us into like what we wanted to talk about for most of the day today, which is our like meat part of the episode, which is like vascular disease. So, Dr. Ted, can you tell us what vascular disease is?
Yes. Vascular disease can basically be described as diseases in circulation. As your listeners certainly understand, the heart is in the chest. That heart pumps the blood out to the extremities and the brain and all the internal organs, all the bones and muscles in this arterial tree. And it really looks like a tree. It's got a big main trunk, which is the biggest blood vessel in your body, called the aorta. And then as that trunk gives off branches, which give off additional branches and more branches. And so when we think about the circulation, we kind of divide it into a circuit. And so the heart is the engine or the pump of that circuit. It sends blood out to the extremities and the head and the neck and the organs and the arteries, and the blood comes back in the veins. And so when we think about vascular disease, we think about disease in the heart or that plumbing. It's all kind of plumbing in this world. And so how does that plumbing get impacted by smoking is, I think, what we're going to talk about today.
And then who's most likely to get vascular disease?
There's certainly a smaller group of patients that have a genetic predisposition, a gene that they've inherited from their parents that may give them, let's say, really high cholesterol and premature problems with their blood supply, premature problems with their blood vessels. But by and large, I think what we see in the business is that vascular disease is often a disease of the elderly. We don't see many young patients in our practice, although that's not totally true. But if you were to look in our waiting room to see who's signed up to see the vascular surgeon that day, you'd find that most patients are pretty elderly. And often they have a couple of risk factors. One of them is diabetes, which causes hardening of the arteries. But the other major risk factor that we see a lot is smoking.
I found when I worked in vascular surgery, we would have patients come in post-operatively and they'd be like, how did this happen? And I was like, well, it could be from your diabetes. It could be because you smoke 3 packs a day. And there's a little part of me, a little part could be genetic. And I felt like every time I said that, they'd be like, oh, it must be genetic. And you're like, no, it's probably the 3 packs of cigarettes that you've been smoking. But I felt
it's probably easier to deal with.
It's got to be genetic.
If you
It's not
feel
my
like
fault.
you've been pre-programmed to have this problem, I think it's maybe intuitively a little bit easier to deal with than if it's a behavioral thing where you say, maybe some choices I've made have led to this.
Yeah.
And it's a hard, as you talked about in the previous episode, it's really, really, really hard to quit, right?
Yeah.
No judgment. But I think as you mentioned, if it's just say, oh, this was going to happen, oh shucks, this was going to happen no matter what.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different than saying, oh man, maybe, back in the day I should have tried to quit, or maybe put some more effort into quitting over my lifespan here.
That's
And
probably
then-
hard to come to terms with.
And so you're a vascular surgeon, board certified. What does that mean? What do you do as a vascular surgeon?
We typically evaluate patients. We're considered like a specialist or a subspecialist. So often like a primary care doctor will be seeing like a really, really big panel of patients. And they're kind of like a quarterback. And they'll pitch the ball to people that they think can help their patients based on risk factors or what they see on exam or maybe some history that they've had. That's about half of what we do. Maybe seeing patients in the office that the primary care doctor has called referred in, said, oh, I'm worried. I listened to the patient's neck and there's a really loud murmur or a whooshing sound. I'm worried that there's a blockage there. Let me go send him over to this vascular surgeon. And then the other half of what we do is deal with blood vessel urgency and emergency issues, like maybe in the emergency department or in the operating room where someone has a blood vessel that gets totally clogged up and they have bad blood flow to their leg and it really hurts. Or maybe a blood vessel that gets so big enough because it bursts and it's leaking into their abdomen or their chest or something like this. But often what we do is we evaluate patients, and we're surgeons, but really most patients that we see, we don't operate on. We talk a lot about blood vessels. We talk a lot about risks and risk reduction. And actually a minority of patients that we operate on. And we do a variety of things that involve traditional kind of open surgery with incisions. And we do a lot of minimally invasive stuff. And something, if you may be thinking about, is like this idea of balloons or stents. Maybe when a patient has a heart attack, they get balloons or stents put in their heart. So it's a pretty wide-ranging specialty, but it involves stuff, seeing patients in the office, as well as some procedures in the hospital.
Mm-hmm. Exciting. You've been doing a lot more endovascular stuff.
Yeah,
At least when I first met you.
Yeah, the beautiful thing about vascular, and the thing that I think is most appealing, is that there's so much cool technology, and that every time you go to look at a problem, you could show a problem to 5 or 7 different vascular surgeons, and there may be 5 or 7 different ways to fix it, using a combination of what they know, what's out there, what's their training, what's their results like. So there's a lot of potential creativity in vascular surgery, and I find that very appealing. I also really like that we're certainly not primary care doctors managing every issue for the patient, but we do get to know patients for the long term, because often if you have a blocked up carotid artery in your neck or a blood vessel in your leg, then you come back to the office and get some testing done year after year. So you have a little bit of a longitudinal patient practice, and you get to know people, and I find that rewarding.
Yeah, I did like that about that. I think I've recently switched over to general surgery, and it's weird to see patients get better so quickly. I've
What's going on here?
Yeah, and I was like, I guess I just like won't see you ever again, which is rewarding. But I do miss getting to know patients. You know, some patients have been seeing for like years and years, and you know, you're like one of the family, you know, and it's really rewarding. So how'd you get into vascular surgery? How did that even happen?
I went after college. I was kind of on the sciencey end, you know, went to biology in college.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I think this program still exists. There was a really cool, but not very well-known program called, it's got this big clunky name, National Institutes of Health Post-Baccalaureate Program. What it really was you spent 1 year after college in a lab in Maryland at the NIH, which was super exciting. You felt like you were at this hub of like science and medicine, and there was all these things going on, and it was just like this university of like science. And I spent 1 year in the lab, and I was working for this guy out of New York, and I'll never forget a tangent. It was the year that the World Trade Centers were taken down by the terrorists. And I remember telling him, because he's from New York, and him crying, but it's an aside, but he was a very powerful, like, very influential figure in my life. He really was I'm convinced that you meet 3 or 4 people in your life, and they really influence you in a really positive way, kind of make you what you are today. And I think in addition to my parents and, you know, a couple other people that I've run into, this was one of those guys. But anyways, my specific role in that place was a basic science laboratory where we were trying to turn white yeast, literally yeast, on a plate to pink. And I was horrible at it. And I didn't do the experiments well. I tried my ass off. I got there early. I stayed late. I didn't have the brain for it. I wasn't good at it. I couldn't. That science, that really detailed rigor of designing.
Pipette skills weren't up there.
No, and it was like, and I was horrible at it. So I said, I'm going to try I'm more of like the people side of this. And so I applied for medical school, got into medical school, and kind of gravitated towards blood vessels. I like the way like the plumbing works, the physiology and the anatomy and the technology. And, I kept plugging along to the point where I thought this could be something that I think could be kind of intellectually stimulating for like many, many years.
And then the rest is history.
The rest is history. Student loans and moving around, and it sounds so glamorous right now looking back. But residency and fellowship are hard because you don't own your time. Your time is kind of dictated to you, and you're working hard, and you're trying to absorb this kind of craft. You hear a lot about the technical parts of how to do stuff and how you do it, but that kind of the people part, I think is almost harder. And so that's what I had to learn and practice was, the so-called art of medicine, air quotes, I guess your listeners can't hear, but which is like, how do you give bad news? When something goes wrong, something shitty happens, how do you talk to a patient and their family? And that part doesn't come naturally. And I think you just learn it over time.
I feel like, especially for people that have very like medical brains, I know this with Kristin too, where you've had to work on your bluntness because for you, it's like, I'm just conveying information. Wouldn't you want this information to be the most efficient way possible? But no, not everyone.
Some people appreciate my honesty.
Yeah. And some people don't. Yeah. So it's definitely a skill and an art form to figure out
I haven't mastered the art form, but
it's getting there.
So as a vascular surgeon, a lot of your patient, you have a high smoking incidence in your patient population.
We do.
How do you go about counseling your patients on smoking cessation? Have you given up entirely?
I think it's really important. And I'll give you an example. I met a patient yesterday. I was up in Waterville, and he had a problem with his ankle. And I was sure smoking was contributing in a major way. I knew it was going to be uncomfortable, but we had the conversation because I really think it's important. It's also important for expectations. I think from a surgical point of view, I try to use this term, which is kind of a hokey term that people use, but like, I want you to be my partner, right? So if I'm on call, nights and weekends, holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, and I'm coming in to work on your blocked blood vessel or your ruptured aneurysm, I love to do that. That's a passion of mine. It will always be a passion of mine. It's important to me, but help me out. Be my partner, right? So if I'll do whatever I can, nights, weekends, holidays, days, whatever, to keep your leg going good, to keep your stroke from not turning into a bigger stroke, to keep your aneurysm from bursting. But I'm hoping you can work with me as a partner and do your part. So it's not a one-way relationship. So that's how I try to couch it. Granted, some people don't want to hear that, right? It's interesting over the years that the people that I've failed on smoking cessation, I think a couple things come to mind. One is, if there's someone else in their life that's smoking a lot, it's hard to quit. Like you can imagine being super tempted with the most addictive chemical on earth, and then having someone like 5 feet away from you just puffing away.
Yeah.
Like you can't imagine them quitting smoking. And then it was funny because I think it's intuitive also to say, well, smoking is expensive, but I think people who smoke almost view the expense as like food or water or gasoline for their car. So the economic, like financial thing, I don't get much buy-in. I'm like, I say this silly, stupid thing the whole time because people think they're going to gain weight. Like the only thing that's going to get fatter is your wallet. And no one ever buys that, I'm surprised. But I do think that if you say, here's the downside to this, like it's real, it's not made up. It's limb loss, and it's not necessarily printed on that pack of cigarettes. So it may not be in your face as much, but here's my experience. And now that I'm older, what I always say, and I'll do this every year for the rest of my life, is I've been doing this for 11 years. And 20 years from now, I'll be saying, I've been doing this for 31 years. And that might just be noise
You have
to
like
people.
a chart on your wall with a bunch of dashes, and you're like carving
All right,
out
let me read it.
one more dash, one more
But
year.
I do try to spend time because I think it is real. And I think if you're looking at saving legs and, potentially saving lives, I think smoking cessation really helps.
Yeah.
I like that language too of taking the shame out of it, of like, we're a partnership of we both have things to work on.
I do my thing, you do yours. Like,
Yeah.
Even if my thing is 90 and yours is 10,
Yeah.
I can live with it. But I can't do 100 and 0.
Yeah.
Because I think expectations and I think most people will meet you there. Like, again, maybe not 50-50, but they'll meet you there at some point. And even if another thing we know about smoking is there's a dose-dependent relationship between smoking and risk. So I'll take it if someone comes in and says, hey, doc, I used to smoke 25 cigarettes per day, and I'm down to 5. I think that's a huge victory.
Yeah,
that's great.
And the data will bear that out. In other words, there is a strong relationship between the more you smoke, the greater the risk. There's a very firm relationship there. So that's a victory.
Yeah.
25 to 20 is a victory. But if you can get someone from 25 cigarettes a day to 3 to 5, I think that's a high five for them.
That's so wonderful, especially in I feel like our culture can be very like abstinence only, especially with like 12-step programs and everything. There's no room for nuance. There's no room for gray of celebrating 5 cigarettes compared to 25 is incredible.
And you get someone that says, I have a coffee in the morning. I have 2 cigarettes. I say, great. I don't think that's going to create huge risk for you. It's that 10, 20, 30 per day.
Yeah.
You smoke it, when you get up, if you have to have a cigarette with your coffee, okay. Not ideal, I guess, but I think it's okay for your blood vessels.
Yeah. That's a wonderful version of harm reduction. Yeah.
I mean, especially after our episode we did with smoking, I guess, like, I've always known smoking is bad, but I just didn't know like how addictive it was. And I think like what we said, how have we not have become smokers? I have
literally
no idea.
Because I've never smoked a single cigarette because I know
like,
how addictive
it's
it is.
just like a miracle that we haven't because it's so addicting. So if you need like 1 cigarette to get through the day, like I get it. I need a cup of coffee to get through the day, and I will forever. If they come out and say coffee causes cancer and you're going to lose your legs because of coffee, I'm probably going to lose my legs. For sure. You will too, for sure.
Well,
We'll be,
they'll just melt right off.
It's incredibly addicting, but also what we learned with ADHD, it can be self-medicating, and I see a lot of our patients. You could kind of see like. I can kind of see, at least the vascular patients, you're like, there's like a little bit of like like some patients you're like, you are a neurodivergent, my friend. And probably needs a Adderall. A lot of our patients, I think.
I'm sure there's a lot of overlap in that Venn diagram.
Yeah.
It seems like the chemical aspect of it, but also kind of with ADHD, you see a lot of that time blindness and this inability to have this future planning. So I think that's part of it too. It seems like so disconnected from the consequences. It's like, well, that would be years down the road, or that wouldn't happen to me. I feel like for everyone that's challenging, but especially with ADHD, where you really have no concept of time. Just feels like this amorphous, impossible thing until you're, getting your toes chopped off.
I've got a few more questions, and then we can get into our bird of the day.
Obviously.
What have the most important part is the bird of the day.
The bird.
We got a bird theme going on. What have you seen in your patients, or what have your patients said have helped the most with smoking cessation?
Well, we live, of course, in the state of Maine, and the state of Maine has a nice resource called the Maine Quit Line. And I actually think it's a real resource, and they can provide free of charge counseling in quitting materials. And I think it's real, and I think it's useful. And I think most states and municipalities have some sort of program, which will probably be cut in the next 10 minutes. But you guys would get on there and get out there now.
Get there now, while supplies last.
But I think it's real. I think sometimes you just need someone, maybe they need someone to listen to, and like on the other end of the phone, it's like, hey, all right, you can do this. It's tough. We all know, I think we all know, everybody that smokes kind of knows they want to quit. There's not like a lot of belligerent people who are like, smoking is my life. I think they want to quit. They just need a little help getting over the hump. And I think, I personally am not a big fan of patches and gums because I think it just kind of creates this really, really long wean process, and it's hard to get there. And like the kind of cold-hearted part of me, which there is that part, says just wake up one day and you're going to have to decide when you're going to quit smoking and just throw your friggin' cigarettes away. It's hard to do that, right? We all know it's super hard to do that, and they would have done that 10 years ago. But maybe they have a vulnerable part because they're in the office and they're looking at something maybe unpleasant on my end to fix their blood vessels. So that might be a point where I can reach them, right? Where it's not just I'm sitting at home watching Jeopardy, smoking a cigarette, but no, I'm in a doctor's office. He says I'm at risk for losing my leg. Maybe now I've got an audience there. But in particular, I do push a little bit for A, the main quit line, which I think is a great resource. And B, I hope one day you wake up and say, I'm throwing these cigarettes away. Alternatively, I'll make up this sometimes random date and be like, Memorial Day, cut it in half.
Yeah, you need ADHDers work well with the deadline.
It's not bad. And then after Memorial Day comes, I'll say July 4th, cut it in half.
Yeah, that's great.
Real quick.
You'd be surprised. It works.
Careful with the... Only because
Spoken from a fellow smacker.
I've done the same thing and I've gotten berated.
So what's that thumping sound?
Who's thumping?
Who's that thumping?
Yeah, I think giving a deadline makes it real and it gives you a goal to do. And it does sound crazy to think that one day you just wake up and decide not to do it. But like really for a lot of ADHDers, I feel like I've heard many experiences and I've done it myself where I've wanted to quit this thing for years and years and years. And it's like, I don't know what it is, but literally just one day you wake up, you're like, today's the day. And it just...
And you just do it.
It kind of just happens,
And you know what's going to happen? They may start smoking again, and they'll have to have another day. But that's okay. I think that all you want, like that partnership, keep trying, keep working at it, and you'll get there. Because maybe you have something bad go on in your life, you start back again. And you just have to get back on the horse if you can, which is like a stupid saying, but I think in some ways it's true.
Yeah, it's like a stress management technique. So, of course, you're going to go through periods where things are better and you don't need it as much. And then maybe something happens and you kind of fall back into it. But yeah, I like that focus of not trying to get to perfectionism of all or nothing, leaving room for that in between. Because that's what people need. They need that understanding. And I also think that's a reason why people like that hotline, because once you talk to people in your life about how you want to quit, now the pressure's on. And now it's like, oh, now I have to do this thing. And then there's shame attached to it. I just think, like you said, having someone to just kind of talk to who's like outside of your life can be really helpful.
Who's understanding.
Yeah, not judgmental.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then studies have shown that, cigarettes, the amount of cigarettes people are smoking is getting smaller, but as that gets smaller, vaping is increasing. Have you seen in your practice an influx of vapors come through?
I'm starting to see that. And I think, it takes a while to build up that data,
Yeah.
And there's a lot of harmful stuff in that vaping cartridge.
We're going to talk about it in a second.
And I think that still puts you at risk. I still think that we don't have all the data collected yet, but I think that overall avoiding vaping, if at all possible, makes sense.
Yeah. I got a couple like poll questions. We do like lots of polls on Instagram, and I have a couple listener questions that I kind of like reached out into the ether, and then a question from Christopher. He had many, but we narrowed it down. So question number 1, and you don't have to go too far in depth into these if you don't want to. And if you don't feel comfortable with answering any of these, we can disguise your voice or we can just edit it out in general. But have you ever smoked?
I smoked very briefly, a handful of cigarettes. The first girlfriend I ever had in high school smoked. And whenever she kissed me, I could taste the cigarette. No. Oh. Her name was Amy.
Amy. We can bleep out her voice.
Yeah, Amy.
Keep her
she
anonymous.
Smoked, and I still remember that taste of her smoking. But really, it's been since high school. I've smoked very little. You could count on one hand how many cigarettes.
Okay. This is another question from Christopher. We can disguise your voice or leave this out in general. Have you ever done a whippet?
I have. So one
Whoa.
year.
Oh, wait a minute.
So
Yes.
I had a lot of weird jobs, like we all did, kind of between high school and college in the summer. The weirdest one was I worked in an ice factory with a bunch of angry Irish men missing fingers because
This
there
was
was
in
all sorts of
Boston?
choppy. Yeah. And so what we did was we would take ice from this giant room, a factory of ice, and they'd squirt it through a big giant hose onto fishing boats so they could ice down their catch. And so we used to take these big rakes and pull it off onto the ship so they could take their ice onto the fishing boats. But the summer before that, I worked as a prep cook, a horrible prep cook, at this place called Marina Bay, which was kind of this like marina-y place in Boston with some restaurants and nightclubs
It's now
and
legal
stuff.
seafoods or something.
Yeah, no, really,
Yeah, I
it's
was gonna
right
say,
there.
Yeah, I worked
And
there.
we being like the prep cooks and these older guys I worked with, we did a lot of whippets in this like walk-in refrigerator.
Did you have like the fancy whipped cream canisters?
I think it was Ready Whip,
Yeah.
but it was like industrial size. I
Okay,
don't know
so
if that
it
made it
wasn't
like
even-
more intense.
It wasn't even like the can
Yeah.
of the air. It was like actual.
Yeah, no, it was,
Ready Whip
yeah.
cans.
And then like
Yeah.
one day the boss came and he's like, "How come none of these whipped creams actually dispense whipped cream?"
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this weird.
I can feel that there's cream in
Everyone's
here.
just like,
Yeah.
do looking up at the ceiling.
So you would do it at work and then like go in the kitchen and cook?
Yeah, I did. I was the guy in charge of like chopping vegetables.
Okay. You're
And
just,
the
like,
worst day I ever
out
had
in
there was
space.
he asked me to like, they were having like a turkey special and there was these like big turkey breasts and they had cooked them, these like big giant turkey breasts. Now my job was to slice them in the slicer and make like real slices so they can make turkey sandwiches or, whatever out of it. But I wasn't good at it and the slicer was set wrong and it just basically like morselized everything into these like tiny fragments. So he comes in and I basically have this like giant tub of tiny bits of turkey. And the guy was like, "What the fuck?" So I was not very good at that.
Yeah. Well, the whippets probably didn't help.
Yeah.
No, that did not.
God.
This was sent in by a listener, which I'm kind of mad I didn't think of to ask this because I think it's important. They ask, what should we do to take care of our vascular health?
Oh, that's a great question.
I know. That's why I'm
That's
mad.
a great
I didn't
question.
know.
And I think the answer is, and again, I think medicine is full of these cliched things, but I think some of these cliches are out there for a reason. And another kind of cliche that I use a lot with patients in the office is movement is medicine. 30 minutes of exercise per day. I don't care if you're walking around Walmart, walking around the mall, walking around the track, bicycling, treadmill, hiking, and I really believe that. The natural kind of divergent point I see in most of our patients is the people that are really sedentary have a trouble and things stack up pretty quick, but the people that really commit to exercise in whatever way they can do it, I think it really makes a difference. So I would say try to get 30 minutes of exercise per day.
Okay. Great. And then these are two we asked on Instagram, but I'd love to hear your take on them. We asked, what is your favorite? I'll give you, it's a multiple choice.
Okay.
What's your favorite ingredient in cigarettes? Arsenic, wood preservative, polonium-210, or formaldehyde?
I'd have to say arsenic because of all the interesting stories through history of like people surreptitiously poisoning people. So I think arsenic has that cachet.
Yeah,
that
it's got good
if
PR.
if you're gonna poison yourself, But I do think that like over history, arsenic has that lore, and I think that makes it interesting. If you as a toxin, I think it's got an interesting history behind it.
That's a good answer.
Yeah,
that's a good answer. And then what is your favorite? This is also multiple choice. What is your favorite ingredient in vapes? Antifreeze, lead, formaldehyde, or paint thinner?
Similarly, I'm fascinated with lead. I've read before that the murder rate in the United States closely paralleled the use of leaded gasoline.
Really?
And
Serial killers, yeah.
Yeah. And so if you look at the history of lead, lead paint, lead gasoline, the switch to unleaded gasoline, there's allegedly a close correlation between murder rates and certain types of crime in the presence of lead in gasoline.
Really?
And lead as a kind of frontal lobe toxin, I think is kind of interesting too, much like arsenic.
I feel like that deserves its own episode.
Yeah,
We should
we
talk
should definitely do
about
a
lead
lead
poisoning.
episode.
A
Yeah.
lead episode. That's all I got. thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. We're gonna have you on again on our next episode. So
Get
if
a
you
little
didn't-
sillier.
Yeah, a little sillier if you less
The
smoking.
serious guy
Yeah.
came on. He ruined the aura.
And-
No, this is
No,
a
I think
surprisingly
you're-
fun
I thought it
episode.
was
Yeah.
fun,
for
very
being so
informational.
Yeah,
I thought it was really
it's
fun.
good balance.
Thank you for joining. Thanks
Thank
for
you for having
coming
me.
all the way down from the north. This is Weirds of Feather podcast. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on TikTok. Grace has all these great animations on TikTok. You can email us at weirdsofeather@gmail.com. You can listen to our Patreon where we have extra content, including that one episode that I said I was going to do.
You're putting too much pressure on yourself.
I know.
You got a big list of stuff
I
to
got
do.
a big list.
Yeah.
I have
You
a
be
notes
busy.
app of stuff I want to cover, and every day it grows.
I want to do a takedown Patreon episode about Mother Teresa, so that's what I'm working on.
Okay.
Because she was a bitch. Just gonna say it. Just gonna
So
say
you can
it.
look forward to that.
Yeah.
But let's get into our bod, which is our bird of the day.
Mm.
We don't really have a song. We have a jingle.
Yeah.
Ted, do you remember bod, like that weird shower gel?
As
that
a
they
body,
used to-
body
Remember,
spray.
and they were like,
Yep.
I want
Yes,
your
I did.
bod. And
Nice
it's just
bod.
like torsos.
Yep.
Playing volleyball at the beach.
Yeah,
I
and
know
it's just
exactly-
like
I know
sweaty
exactly what you're
torsos.
saying.
Yes.
Great.
So good.
You're the first person.
You're the only
Yep.
person who's remembered that. But that's
Yeah.
what we were playing on. So we do bird of the day. We got a bird theme here.
We're gonna make you imitate a bird call.
Yeah.
In a
Okay.
second.
Yeah.
All right.
But first we got to learn about a bird. And
Yeah.
so I picked your dad. So I picked the jacana, which is a tropical bird, and it has these. It looks like almost like a little pheasant, and it has these really long legs with these really long toes because it walks across like lily pads. And the mom bird, the female bird, lays the eggs, and then she's like gone off with other men. And then the
Good for
dad
her.
bird sits on the eggs, takes care of the eggs, and then raises the chicks. And he'll like round up his chicks and like carry them under his wings. And then
Aw.
like walk across the lily pads with like all these like little tiny legs sticking out from underneath his
Oh.
legs. Meanwhile, mom nowhere to be found.
So he doesn't like go
She's
out
like-
to get a pack of bird cigarettes
No.
and leave the flock.
That's what
No.
mom does.
Mom
She's
does.
like, here are my eggs. See you
They're
never.
pretty rare in nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's nice to see equality. you
Yeah,
know?
it's nice.
Moms can be deadbeats too.
Yeah, exactly. But here I have a bird call.
All right. You're
Okay.
Are
right.
you feeling
I can do
strong? Yeah. Okay. Go for it.
Pretty good.
That's like one of the best bird calls we've had on the show.
Yeah.
Grace.
You're just saying that.
No,
you should hear
You go
us.
back into our archive. There's some really rough episodes.
It's from us.
Yeah.
Our guests are usually like so much
Yeah,
better
our
than we
guests
are.
well prepared.
Yeah.
It's almost like a cat.
Yeah.
Mew, mew, mew.
I think we nailed it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think this is a good one.
I think we got it.
All right.
All right.
All right. See ya. Bye.